Well, we could have potentially woken up to more bombardments and aerial strikes from the South Sudanese People Defense Forces because a UN staffer was attacked by a military personnel in South Sudan. But the reason as to why we didn't have that kind of a reaction from the South Sudanese People Defense Forces is because it is the South Sudanese People Defense Forces itself that attacked that UN staffer. That is part of the story that I'm going to tell you in this video, as well as there have been a number of people who have defected from the South Sudanese People Defense Forces, and they are allegedly with the SPLA-IO, that is the opposition forces in South Sudan. I'm also going to tell you about that incident where 175 personnel of the South Sudanese People Defense Forces defected. They left the camp of Salva Kiir to go and join the camp of Dr. Riek Machar. Well, this is bonafide. If you haven't subscribed, kindly subscribe and hit that notification button so that when I release something new on the South Sudan crisis, you get notified as soon as possible. When a UN staffer was attacked by the South Sudanese People Defense Forces troops while she was on her way to a UN base in Yambio. This is an incident that was shocking to many because when you're talking about what is happening in South Sudan right now, it all began with a UN personnel being attacked by the White Army in Nasir. Now we are talking about the government forces, South Sudanese People Defense Forces troops, having attacked a UN staffer while she was on her way to a UN base in Yambio. We are talking about the United Nations mission in South Sudan. That is the UNMISS mission that has been in South Sudan since 2011. And it has been a cause of this second upflare of insecurity in South Sudan. The reaction that the government gave the White Army while that helicopter was attacked, of course, it cannot be compared to this attack that I'm going to tell you right now. That was a devastating attack where a general and other personnel of the South Sudanese People Defense Forces were harmed and others lost their lives because of that attack. In this particular attack, the female staffer was stopped by two soldiers from the South Sudanese People Defense Forces and suffered an ear injury in the attack. This is according to a statement that was given by UNMISS. And of course, that statement read that at around 1 p.m. on 26th May, a female staffer serving with the United Nations mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, was assaulted after being stopped by two South Sudanese People Defense Forces soldiers while she was driving to the mission's base in Yambio, suffering an injury to her ear. And the South Sudanese People Defense Forces reacted with speed when this incident happened because, of course, as I started by saying, this is a huge incident in South Sudan because this second upflare of insecurity came because a UN staffer was attacked. Now we are getting this kind of a reaction from the government forces itself. And the government of the day, the South Sudanese government, reacted with speed to settle the matter because this was solely in their hands. And they said that UNMISS received an apology and a letter of condemnation of the behavior from the acting governor of Western Equatoria State, and the South Sudanese People Defense Forces has advised that the soldiers involved have been arrested. Well, the current rate of insecurity in South Sudan is alarming because we are almost going to a full-scale civil war between the government and the opposition, just that things are not as lethal as they were just a few years ago. What we know so far is that still the first vice president and his allies, top generals of the SPLA-IO, are still incarcerated by the government of the day. They are still under house arrest. Now we are talking months in house arrest. We still have some sense of high insecurity in the country. SPLA-IO fighting on different fronts with the South Sudanese People Defense Forces. The White Army is also fighting against the government. We have pockets of different armed groups that are opposing the government, fighting against the South Sudanese People Defense Forces, and the South Sudanese People Defense Forces also going very hard against any person who is coming up against the government. They are using all manner of forces. Remember, South Sudan has an arms embargo, but we are still seeing choppers up high. We are still seeing the Ugandan forces in South Sudan, which was prohibited by the UN. The Ugandan forces are still in South Sudan, assisting the South Sudanese People Defense Forces in fighting against the opposition of the day. And in another instance, while we have been hearing about defections from the opposition to the government side, we've been talking about many troops, many contingents in different parts of South Sudan moving from serving the opposition to serving the government of the day because of the kind of perks that they are getting from the government, because of the recognition that they are getting from the government. Many troops have been leaving the opposition camp and go to fight with the South Sudanese Defense Forces. Well, in a turn of events, right now we are reporting about 175 troops that defected from the government, from the South Sudanese People Defense Forces, to go and serve the opposition. In a report that read that 175 South Sudanese People Defense Forces soldiers from Murle ethnic group deserted their post in Nasir and proceeded to go to Akobo County of Jonglei State. There, they were given a safe passage by SPLA-IO. Allegedly, the soldiers were conscripted forcefully. While the spokesperson of SPLA-IO, Lam Paul, came out to say that he did not accept these fighters into the SPLA-IO fraternity. Of course, it goes without saying that if they were given safe passage, it means in one way or another, these troops that defected from the South Sudanese Defense Forces had some agreement with the opposition forces so that they can be given a safe passage and some can be now accepted to fight with the opposition of the day. The report also notes that most of these fighters were conscripted in Juba, and they say that they were forcefully conscripted into the South Sudanese Defense Forces. Now that brings up a lot of questions on how the South Sudanese Defense Forces has been getting troops to work for them. If you are getting troops and they are saying that we are leaving because we were forced to sign to be part of the South Sudanese Defense Forces, it begs to question on how many people are still in South Sudanese Defense Forces who are forced to be among the troops and serve the South Sudanese Defense Forces against the opposition in the country. Well, I will keep you informed of the latest of what is happening in South Sudan regarding this latest crisis. Keep it bona fide.